line. This one, Cus I Wanna. And in this case, Cus I Wanna means that I wanted to talk to another long-haired hippie commie junkie weirdo freak like myself. However, I'm
The
looking forward to particularly to this one because I'm talking to Bible scholar and Dead Sea Scrolls expert, Dr. Kipp Davis. And I got to tell you, when I promoted this show online, I get all these people that show up in social media, and I got to be honest, I don't even think they're all like real people anymore. I feel like I'm arguing with a bunch of bots. But just in
yeah.
case, all these people who think that they could waste me in a debate and they want to all arrange public debates and all of that, well, if you really think you can destroy me like you say you can, well, this is the promo that I wrote. I said, call in tonight when I'm on the line with Bible scholar and Dead Sea Scrolls expert Dr. Kipp Davis. Tell us how we're reading out of context or how it means something else in the original Hebrew, because Kipp knows Hebrew. Tell
Teach
a
it.
pair of apostates to come to Jesus when we've both already been there and done that before we saw the light of reason and got better. Call us. Have the spirit of your magic imaginary friend speak through you to explain how we are wrong. Save our souls, anonymous caller. You're our only hope. And
You
then,
know, it's my favorite thing in the world, Arn Ra, when people call in or people talk to me and want to talk down to me and teach me about what the Bible actually says
that
and
happens to you?
the original language is. Oh my God, dude. So much. It happened to me today already, this morning, before lunch. I was told that I have a poor understanding of
Oh,
the Bible and of religion, and you know, it's my favorite thing. It's my favorite thing ever.
that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, it really is.
And
So,
what surprises me when dealing with creationists is how they want to make sure that they talk outside of your level of expertise.
mm,
So I've seen people like Matt Slick, for example. He gets into an argument when we're talking about scientific evidence, and he tries to dismiss all scientific evidence, saying that I can't prove that I existed 2 weeks ago because I might just be a brain in a vat. So all of the evidence that I'm presenting against the global flood, for example, can be negated. Even though I say, well, the global flood is one of the few things that we can say that we know absolutely did not happen. Because if your
absolutely.
argument is that all of history is fictitious, that I'm not even real, that history isn't even real, that nothing ever really happened, well, then that means that Noah's Ark never really happened. It didn't happen in the real reality, and it didn't happen in your alternative fantasy either. So therefore, we know absolutely that that's not the case. Then the same guy debates Matt Dillahunty a week later, and now he's promoting evidence, what he thinks is evidence for the flood. But now they're going to argue on philosophy, right? So he's arguing against, he's trying to argue philosophically with me and accusing me of being philosophically inept. But then he's going to argue evidence with Matt Dillahunty because he's not going to touch Dillahunty on philosophy, right? So they
Yeah.
always argue away from your strengths. So I get told all the time that I
Well,
don't know the Bible, and I get a chuckle out of. I mean, I will readily admit I don't know the Bible as well as you do. I don't know the Bible as well as a whole bunch of the people that I work with, but I damn sure know it better than most of the critics who are criticizing me.
you've read it a few times, I'm guessing. I have, um, in English and other languages. Um, my favorite thing about creationists is something that they're absolutely right about, and that is that in Genesis chapter 1, the earth was created in 6 24-hour days. They're all absolutely right, absolutely on point about this. Problematically, that is where the text ends and where it completely confronts any aspect of reality or science or any part of this world that we actually live in. So,
You were going to talk to me about we had discussed this in advance, and on the
yeah,
expectation that there's likely not going to be any callers. And I will check to see if
probably
there are any
not.
callers in call-in studio. I'm not expecting that there will be, but uh,
Scary. I mean, I think we're both pretty scary up here.
well, it'll be a
Um,
bucket of chuckles if there is. However, as I predicted, there is not. There's not one.
Go figure.
Yeah. So I was
So,
expecting
yeah.
that we were going to hear crickets because all these people that they're so brave when they're hidden behind anonymity. When they're using some moniker like Jesus saves or whatever. That's their username, and we don't have any idea what whether they're actual people or not. But out there, I'm sure,
That's
are a few
possible.
people who sincerely believe what they've always believed because they were taught by their family and everybody they respect to believe this. And some of them are beginning to figure out that their family is full of shit and doesn't really know what they're talking about. And so they begin to explore other avenues, and that's where they come across people like you and me. Sir, would you
Yeah.
please talk to me about prophecy?
Yeah. I actually, I'm my specialization's pretty narrow. It's early Judaism, Second Temple Judaism, the Dead Sea Scrolls. I did my PhD dissertation in apocalyptic literature, which deals quite a bit with this concept of prophecy. So this tends to be right in my wheelhouse. And it is something that has a propensity to be, I think, generally misunderstood. Because and I'll be honest with you, when I entered the YouTube space some years ago, it surprised me, even though I grew up within an evangelical church, and I was strongly conditioned for a very long time about the veracity of the prophecies in the Old Testament for confirming the identity and the historicity of Jesus. Even through all that, I had all this stuff drummed out of me almost entirely through grad school and through my PhD, and then was surprised to, enter this space on YouTube and see how much so many Christian apologists continue to forward these ideas and push this sense that prophecy is one of the best. Uh, I'll use the word because they use it. Evidences for for the identity of Jesus as the Messiah, and I have to say I don't see it because I feel like I have a stronger understanding of what prophecy is. In terms of things that I think the most ancient people would have understood to be prophecies, they tend to be less recognizable to us because in the first place, prophecy tended to be more about making projections about foreign policy, about things that the king or the king or his administration are supposed to undertake to see to the success of the realm. This is not altogether very different from what foreign policy advisors do today. Of course, in antiquity, they consulted deities and they had creative ways of forwarding their own thoughts about this that we don't use anymore. But this, in the first place, this was mostly just about trying to understand the natural world as well as the political world, and trying sort out how to interact with that as much as we can without totally fucking ourselves over. That's what it used to be about. So a lot of the early prophecies that you discover within the Hebrew Bible are much more about, changing your conduct or your behavior in order to become more pleasing to God. It has less to do with actually making predictions about things that are going to happen in the future. But this does happen over time. This starts to happen later because God gets judgy, and God starts to get upset about continued failure. And so he starts to deal with it in the way that I guess worked best for him, since the beginning of his when he started doing this God thing. Threats seem to be the way that he communicates, and as a result, prophecies start to become more and more about, if you don't change your behavior, then I'm going to do these terrible things to you. And over time, this is something that becomes marshaled by even later writers into thinking about or imagining that terrible things that did actually happen to them were the result of, threats that were issued in a past in an earlier period. So you start to see in biblical texts like the book of Jeremiah or the book of Daniel or the book of Ezekiel, some of these projections about, how God's going to take away your land and he's going to send you away into exile, unless you turn around and start behaving better. This it's what we call ex eventu prophecy, which is most of what prophecy is in, like what we modern people tend to think of as prophecy. That's most of what it is. It's prophecy after the fact. It's shooting the arrow and then drawing the bullseye around the arrow after the fact. It's, and
Is that
when you
what they
do
call the
that,
Texas sharpshooter fallacy?
yeah, I think that's it. You're from Texas, aren't you? I'm not. I'm Canadian, so we don't we don't we don't know about such things. But that's kind of how it works. So, when Christian apologists especially like to talk about the astonishing accuracy of things that appear in the book of Daniel, which they assume were written, in the 6th century BCE. Scholars know this. We can clearly see and understand that no, these are things that were written in the 2nd century by a clever writer who was projecting them backwards and putting them in the mouth and in the hands of this legendary figure named Daniel, of whom we know nothing about apart from this fiction that grew up around him. And they're pretending that Daniel is making these predictions in the distant past, about the future, and then they can turn around and say, "Oh wow, look, this was all preordained by God, to come true." And there's
And
a
if I
whole,
may ask what a prophecy is. I mean, 'cause my understanding is that Christians like to say, "Well, there's 300 prophecies that were fulfilled by
yeah,
Jesus." Yeah,
yeah.
tell me three. We get one which was arbitrarily done, deliberately to fulfill the prophecy artificially after it had already failed, which is
Which one do
establishing
you have in mind there?
establishing the nation of Israel that would always exist until it
Oh,
didn't.
oh.
And then somebody realized that it didn't exist. So the prophecy's already failed, but they're gonna create it just to fulfill it. And then that's it. And when I said I asked for three, I get that one, and then I get where Matthew talks about Isaiah in fulfilling prophecy with the virgin giving birth, and of course that's like the most spectacular failure of a prophecy that I've ever read. It's stunning how badly that one failed. And just to give everybody an idea, 700 years before the Christmas scene, Isaiah is trying to console his king. And please correct me if I get anything of this wrong, because I'm working off the top of my head for memory here. The king is worried about his like Syrian and Palestinian enemies, and he's like, they're gonna kill me and everything. And Isaiah says, "Don't worry, there's a young maiden who is pregnant, and she's gonna have a baby, and by the time the baby is old enough to decide whether they like curds better than honey, or well, the other way around, then by that time you'll already know that your Syrian and Palestinian enemies are no threat to you." However, so much went wrong with that. First of all, it was not a virgin, it was a maiden. She was supposed to already be pregnant. She turned out not to be. Yeah. So Isaiah, to ensure that his prophecy succeeded, he knocked her up himself. And then the woman was supposed to give birth to a child named, what was it? What was
Emmanuel?
Emmanuel, right? Well, Jesus's name is not Emmanuel, and you could talk about the meaning of Emmanuel or whatever, but Isaiah knocked the chick up and then forgot to name her the thing he prophesied that it would be named. So he named it, something Malal Hashbaz, something ridiculous like that. Completely fucked up his own prophecy. And then, before the kid got old enough to turn honey over curds, the Syrian and Palestinian enemies came in and killed everybody. So that prophecy failed spectacularly. And whoever wrote Matthew, because it wasn't Matthew, didn't understand what he had read in Isaiah, and that Isaiah wasn't talking about Jesus. Isaiah was talking about an unremarkable kid who had no future other than, do I like honey better than cottage cheese?
Yeah, I mean, you're right on several points. I'll quibble about a few things.
Okay.
But this is we don't know who we don't know who the maiden was. We don't know. Most scholars, I think, believe that this was the wife of Isaiah. I don't. I go with a minority opinion on that. I think this was probably the probably a member of the king's harem. And I think that there probably was a child that was born whose name was Emmanuel, who was part of the royal household. And
Was a child named Emmanuel?
we don't know anything about. We know nothing about what happened after the utterance of the prophecy.
Where did the Malal Hashbaz kid come
That's
from?
a different. Well, so those were different prophecies that were issued later. And I think you probably could take the tack that you do in connecting the failure of the first prophecy, or the fact that there was no child born named Emmanuel that's identified within the text, to say that this was then corrected by Isaiah. That's a way you could go. It's not the only way you need to go. And that's part of the problem here is there's, as much as I feel like we know about the text, there's a lot of things we just don't. And we sort out as we work through. But I think in terms of the important points, you got the important points right. And I will point this out time and time again. This is not a prediction on a few. First of all, he does not say that she will become pregnant. He says that she is pregnant. He says this is already something that's happened. So this part of it is not the prediction of it's not that one day there's going to be a pregnancy happening. No. In the text of Isaiah 7:14, this is presented as something that has already happened. So that part of it is not at all prophetic. It's not predicting something that's going to take place. And you're absolutely right. This is not a virgin. She is already pregnant. There's a perfectly good word in Hebrew that he could have used to indicate that this was a virgin, and he did not use that word. He used a different word. The word used in Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14 is alama in Hebrew, which is generally translated as young woman. And there's various ideas about what this word means. I generally think that the most appropriate way of understanding it is probably with reference to a woman who is sexually active but does not have children yet, has not yet given birth to any children. So this is the difference between a betula in Hebrew, which is a woman who's never had sex, an alma, a woman, I should say a female, because these are sometimes children, girls. So this is an alma is a female who has sorry, a betula is a female who's never had sexual intercourse. An alma is a female who has become sexually active but has not given birth to children yet. And then an isha is a woman who has given birth to children, who is coupled up, married, if you will, to a man and has given birth to children. So I think you'll notice there the important distinction here is that the word itself probably is disclosing information to us about the fact that this is a sexually active female who doesn't have children. It tells us, right, she's pregnant. So this is not a virgin by our estimation or understanding of the text. So that's the two really important things, in particular, insofar as the prophecy was used, the text was used by Isaiah to say something completely different from what it was ever intended to say. All that this was intended to do when Isaiah uttered this prophecy, all of this stuff, this is not the important part of his message. He's not interested. He's not drawing the king's attention to this event, except to point out that there is a time that there's a clock in place here. He's setting a time limit. He's saying, probably within 2 years of now, within 2 years, you're not going to have to worry about your enemies, and that would be Damascus and Samaria to the north, who were threatening King Ahaz, and that's the important part of this, really. And this is where I think there's some other where I'll maybe offer some other correction here. So this is, I mean, this is generally, the time period's probably not entirely accurate, but this is something that happened. Samaria and Damascus were both destroyed by the invading Assyrians from the north. And the region came under complete Assyrian control. Judah, at the time, appealed to Assyria because this was the whole reason for the prophecy in the first place. Damascus and Samaria, the northern kingdom of Israel, were both trying to mount a rebellion. They were trying to assert their own independence against this, enormous power in the north, the Assyrian Empire, and they were organizing a coalition, and they were calling on all these smaller kingdoms in the area, including Jerusalem, where little Jerusalem, little Judah, where Ahaz ruled. They're calling on him to say, "Hey, come join our come join our band. We're gonna go and fight against the Assyrians, but we need everybody's help to do this." And Ahaz was like, "I don't know. Seems like a bad idea." I mean, Assyria is big and powerful, and they can fuck us up. I don't know why you guys really want to do this, but he's upset about this. He's stressed about this because now Damascus and Samaria are like, look, if you're not going to come and fight with us, we're just going to come down there and we are going to kill you and we're going to put in a king who will do what we want. Because both Damascus and Samaria were much more powerful than little Jerusalem. So this is where Ahaz gets scared. He's upset. He calls Isaiah, and Isaiah issues this prophecy and says, "Don't worry about them, because they're, God's going to look after them. God's going to look after Samaria and Damascus. Don't worry about them." But then Isaiah does something else where he says, "Ask me for another sign," and Ahaz refuses to do so because maybe he's afraid about testing the power and the capriciousness of the gods. Maybe he doesn't want to do that, so he says, "No, I'm not going to do that." And then Isaiah says, "Well, now I'm upset, so I'm going to give you a sign anyways." And at that point, he tells them, in addition to the fact that Assyria that Samaria and Damascus are going to be destroyed by the Assyrians within 20 years, your kingdom, you're also going to be overrun by the Assyrians, just because you're not listening to me. So. In the resulting aftermath of all this, Ahaz loses favor with Isaiah, with the prophet, because instead of putting his trust in Yahweh to do this for him, to just look after the threat from Samaria and from Damascus, he decides to take matters into his own hands, and he contacts the Assyrians himself and says, "Hey, I want to be on your team. I want to fight with the big dog against these smaller guys." And at that point, the Assyrian king says, "Yeah, sure, come and join our team." And this makes Isaiah very upset. Things work out okay for Ahaz in his lifetime, and he becomes an Assyrian vassal. Isaiah gets mad. He throws a little pity party, and he decides because of that he's never speaking to Ahaz ever again. So, as you can tell, Matthew, the writer of the Gospel of Matthew, whoever that was, talking about Jesus, clearly had no idea at all what this text was about, or he just didn't care, which is something that happened a lot too. Sorry, I'm rambling. I've been rambling for a while.
We have actually got a caller.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. And this is not somebody to argue with us, I don't think. But this is Seth in Minnesota. Says it has a question for me, which I think is a waste when I've got somebody like you on the show. But Seth, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes. What is your question, sir?
So you quoted this verse. I actually did want to make a little bit of an argument with you or a discussion. You quoted the verse Matthew 15:11 numerous times. The verse where Jesus says, "It is not what goes into the mouth, what goes out of the mouth that will defile you." And you said that when Jesus says that, he means he's talking about curses. And I just wonder where you're getting that in terms of the interpretation or what it actually is saying. And I'm coming across, and I'm asking this because generally the religious position that I'm familiar with, and I'm not saying I'm taking their side, but the general what I've heard from the religious position is that this particular set of verses before this is the Pharisees are hassling Jesus because his disciples aren't washing their hands before they eat, and they make a fuss of this, and that's when Jesus says this. And as I understand it, the way the religious position is that the Pharisees are generally portrayed by the religious people I've heard to be this group of people that present themselves as very overly righteous. Like, look at how righteous I am. Look at how well I'm following the law. But generally speaking, numerous times Jesus will out them and basically say, no, you guys are a bunch of hypocrites. You guys try to say you're following the law, but you guys aren't. You guys are a bunch of hypocrites. You guys aren't following the law. In fact, there's a set of verses somewhere else. I don't remember where, but I've heard of it, where there was this law at the time, Jewish law, where if your parents could not work, were not able to work for some reason, you had to give them, it was called a gift at the time, which essentially meant you had to give them some of your money to help them cover expenses, right? So, or live comfortably. And the way the Pharisees got out of this was to say, oh, we're giving our money to God. And and apparently Jesus knew about this and basically got after them for it. I don't know exactly what set of verses that is, but I've heard that there's a story somewhere in the Bible. But so go back to going back to Matthew 15:11 is, I don't understand. I'm just coming across it because I'm asking the question because I'm just trying to understand where you're getting this, why you think Jesus means he's talking about curses, and he's not just saying, oh, this isn't about curses, it's about the state of your heart when you speak. You'll reveal the state of your heart and how wicked you are by what you say, and it's not about curses.
Well, I'm sure that Kipp will back me up on the Old Testament references that I'm about to jump into.
Okay.
But Jesus was an iconoclast. He was a cult leader. He appropriated an awful lot of Judaism, but he was also fucking with it because he was changing everything in it. So he would come up with excuses for, when you can't work on the Sabbath, but if your cow fell into a ravine, you're going to help the cow out, right? So there's always an excuse for why you can break the Sabbath, and a handful of other things that Jesus liked to talk about. And one of them is that, the old tradition of washing your hands. So creationists like to bring up the argument that, that these ancient Hebrew people knew that they were supposed to wash their hands, therefore God had revealed to them the dangers of pathogens and all of this, except that argument falls apart when you realize that Jesus is arguing against washing your hands for the reason that it doesn't matter what goes into your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth that defiles you. So in the Old Testament times, if we can fairly say there was such a time, then people would say, if people would make the Sam Kinison joke that I hope you slide under a gas truck and taste your own blood, that was a curse. That the fact that you expressed that sentiment meant that it would happen. And a blessing would be, may the wind always be at your back, or the road rise to meet you. These were blessings. So you're making a wish, literally, wishing for good things or wishing for bad things, and people took that shit seriously. So Jesus really is thinking that you say these things, and because you said them, it might come true. Jesus didn't have the fucking clue about pathogens. The fuck did he know? He pretended that diseases were caused by demons. Which I think
I wanted to ask you about that. Where does he say that specifically?
When did he cast demons into a herd of pigs?
Oh, I knew about that.
And then rush him off a cliff?
I didn't know, but where does he say that? Does he say that at some point that in a verse saying that diseases are caused by demons? Does he say it in some way?
Yes. What was the verse where he most explicitly said that? When he's trying to cure, if he ever tried to describe what the cause of the malady was, and I wish I could remember the one time he said what the cause of the malady was, it was demons. So he has to cast demons out of somebody and then take the demon that was causing the disease and put it into pigs and then cause the pigs to run off a cliff and kill themselves. So
Okay.
Jesus absolutely was not the guy you want to get medical advice from.
I get you.
Jesus,
I will just say that I can hear the counter in my head to what you as to why you think that Jesus was saying this about curses, and I forgot to mention this is that Jesus was not is that Jesus was talking was hitting the Pharisees about the wasn't so much saying that don't wash your hands ever. He was just saying you're making this your tradition her tradition as it was like a religious tradition for them, not just in terms of pathogens or washing hands to clean. It was actually like this serious religious tradition for them, and he was hating them on that. He was basically saying, you guys are taking this way more seriously than you need to, that to the point that that's why he was bringing up what you say is what's going to hurt you more. It's going to reveal your wicked heart. It's what's going to reveal your wicked heart. That's That's actually what I came up with the Google search as the general interpretation. Is that what he means by that is by what you say is you will reveal how wicked your heart. You can reveal how wicked your heart is. That's what apparently the general.
There are a number of things that. There are a number of things that the Jesus character reportedly said in the four Gospels that remain canonical that have been assumed to be wise. And a lot of these things I read very differently. I read where Jesus is holed up in a room with his sycophants, and his mother and brother are outside, and Jesus denies his mother and brother because they're not his family. The people who worship me are my family, not my mother and brother. So and when Jesus says you can't serve two masters, right? You can either serve your Lord or money, but not both. What is he really saying there? In that point, Jesus is saying, give me all of your money, all of it. Don't hold back anything for food or clothing. The Lord will help you out. Give me all your money, and I will at some point distribute it to a boys' orphanage in Haiti or some such shit that I made up. But don't worry about it because I don't have to give tax. I don't have to give records for financial records for a religion. Just give me all your money, and don't hold anything back for yourself. When you give it to me,
or I was sorry to interrupt, but I was just going to say, I've always actually, since I've become an atheist, I've actually had a big problem with the whole give up all your belongings to come follow me. It's like, okay, you're saying give up everything I might need to live? Is that what you're asking? I can't live in some relative comfort to follow your teachings? That's ridiculous.
And in some cases,
if I can interject some perhaps unwanted nuance here. So several things that we need to keep in mind, I think, when we're looking at stuff like this is first and foremost, the Gospels are presenting a picture of this man, Jesus, and his life and his ministry from a distance. Later in the future, so it's difficult to align things that the Gospels say about who Jesus was and lots of times what his motivations were with the actual man who existed who lived and died in the first third of the first century CE. So when we see what's in the Gospels, we have to try and think about, first and foremost, what is the church group congregation who is writing and collecting these texts, what are they trying to communicate to us? What is the message that they want to deliver in view of the life and teachings of this man that we have determined to be the Jewish Messiah? So that's first and foremost, and I think you're right in that the appropriate way to look at a text like this at the outset is to read it within a late first century, probably, polemic against the larger existing Jewish establishment. And this is where things get tricky and difficult, because at the time there's a sea shift that changes. A sea shift that changes, or a sea shift that happens. There's a sea shift that happens, um, you know, in 70 CE with the end of the Jewish War. Uh, all that emerges out of this from the earlier shape and existence of Judaism is a type of Judaism we call Pharisees. These are the Pharisees. Jesus is most directly confronted by and most commonly confronting the Pharisees throughout the Gospels, because these are the people with whom the church at a later point in time has the most problems with, because it's the Pharisees who kind of came through the Jewish war and survived, and almost all the other of the wide variety of Jewish groups just didn't survive. So and I think that brings me to another point here, is among the varieties of Jewish groups that we know of prior to the Jewish war, the ministry and the life of Jesus actually fits in with some of them. Many things that Jesus seems to have taught or forwarded seem in line with things that we see and read in the Dead Sea Scrolls from the Essenes, who wrote and collected these texts. So and that's kind of who most scholars think that this person was. In the first third of the first century, he was an apocalyptic prophet. These messages and these instructions about abandoning everything and coming and following me has to do with this strong impression that the world is ending imminently, and is going to be replaced by a new world, the kingdom of God. And
Okay.
because of that, you don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about anything, right? You don't have to worry about your next meal, or if you're gonna have a job. You don't have to worry about getting married. You don't have to worry about your kids, because you know what? Within a very short period of time, God's just going to look after all of that anyway. So that's where this message comes through, I think, more strongly. And by the time the Gospels are written, some of that message is already becoming softened, because there is this recognition, right, that we had this big war, this Jewish war, which it resulted in the Romans clamping down even harder, which shows to the entire world that this didn't work. It didn't happen. So there's already pivoting taking place by the time the Gospels are written to I guess a more prolonged outlook, and one that I'll repeat it, is in fierce opposition to whatever it was that the Pharisees were teaching and promoting. With this particular text, I don't have it offhand. I remember looking at this in grad school, but there is a reflection of Jesus' statement here in Matthew 7 verse 10 and 11, where talking about what goes into a man that defiles him. He's actually entering into here at a dialogue that we know of that's preserved in the Mishnah, which is the earliest layer of the rabbinic literature. And there was a dispute between individual factions, Pharisaic factions, the house of Hillel and the house of Shammai, disagreed about about purity laws, about dietary laws, about laws with respect to ritual purification, and that is what this is probably reflecting on.
That's exactly, yeah, the ritual, that's where I was thinking about it, was the ritual purification. And thank you so much for going into a lot of detail. What you said just now makes so much sense when you approach it from that angle and realize that a lot of what Jesus said, especially like the verses where he talks about family, hate everyone in your life or you can't follow me, makes a lot more sense when you think of him as an apocalyptic prophet that just thinks the world's going to end.
I'll say this one more thing too, quickly, and then I'll shut up. But I think as well, my own personal opinion is that the idea of who the Messiah was at this time is badly misunderstood by modern people, by the later expressions, in large part. And this is the fault of the church for basically deifying this Jesus figure. He almost certainly did not think he was God. He almost certainly did not promote himself as God. He did not think that that he was a divine being who was, going to. He didn't think of himself in those terms. There's good reason to think, especially when you go to the earliest layer of some of the stuff in the book of Mark. There's reason to think that when Jesus talks about the Son of Man in Mark, he might not even be talking about himself. He might be making reference to this figure that's going to come and usher in the kingdom of God. So lots of this stuff gets really complicated. And again, I'm not. I should say at the outset, I'm not a New Testament scholar. I had to read it in grad school, and I have to deal with it as part of my own work in the literature of the period. But it's certainly not my specialization, and there are certainly scholars out there who will will see that there's a stronger message about the divinity of the Messiah, but I just don't think it's.
Nonetheless, I've spoken to a number of New Testament scholars, and I don't get from any of them that Jesus ever promoted himself as God in the flesh, the way Trinitarian Christians so often present him. So the way that I read it, and the way that the New Testament scholars seem to read it, as I understand them, is that Jesus always only ever distinguished himself from God. God is someone else, somewhere else, who knows things Jesus doesn't know. And so Jesus can't even be. I used to think of this thing where, God is outside of our world. Our world is a video game. God is outside of this. He's in the super dimension. So he's in, the video game is two-dimensional and limited time, and he's outside of their time because the game starts and stops whenever he wants to. So he exists outside of time. Perfect analogy for what God is, right? Well, that would mean that if Jesus is God in the flesh, then Jesus is the avatar character in the game that God is playing. But then, wouldn't Jesus know everything God knows?
Yeah, and actually, that actually brings up a thought I had. I actually came up with this argument in my head that I actually could see someone making for why Jesus is supposedly God, is that how is he able to so easily quote scripture and verse when during a time, yes, there's probably a lot more people that are well read, but just the average person is going to be able to, like, it just seemed, especially someone who is wandering around and there's no record of his education or where he was educated or anything like that. How is he suddenly that's I could see them being that their argument is like, how can he know the Bible front and basically front and back, or at least the Old Testament so well without having knowledge of God telling him or something. That's what I could hear.
Right, but I mean, this is the difference, right?
Book.
Between
the whole culture reads one compilation of the whole library is in one book, one compilation. So how hard is that? I can it was been 30 years since I put on lingerie in a movie theater, but I can still quote back to you every single line of Rocky Horror Picture Show. If you practice something enough, you're gonna know it.
That's true.
I mean, as I was
coming across, I'm just thinking of. I guess I'm just saying, like, I'm approaching it from a person who might say the average Joe, maybe Joe Schmo on the during that time isn't necessarily going to be that well read to know scripture and verse.
Not at all.
So they could surmise maybe that Jesus knows it back to front because he's getting information from God somehow, I guess.
Well, he's not, because he's not. He's not. He's a northern. He's a Galilean common man. Based on the scholarly the majority scholarly reconstruction of Jesus is he's a northern commoner, almost certainly illiterate. All of the scripture quotations that we read Jesus making in the Gospels are almost certainly things that were inserted into his mouth by the gospel writers, because they're not writing history. They're writing they're writing theology on the basis of the life of this man. And Jesus was probably a really charismatic guy, extremely a gifted pitchman, speaker. He was almost certainly illiterate, because literacy in early Judea was sparse, and it was restricted almost entirely to higher social levels of society, that a world he really didn't have access to. What likely happened to him is he amassed a small gathering of people who were convinced, like he was, that the end of the world was coming and that God's kingdom was nigh, as the expression goes, the old English expression. If he thought he was the Messiah, and I think there's a chance he didn't think he was a god. He thought he was just the person who was going to help usher in this new kingdom, which probably explains how he ended up in Jerusalem at the time of the Passover, attempting a coup in the temple precincts, which is almost certainly what got him executed by the Romans. So that's what happened to him.
People in the comments are remarking.
You went into such detail, because my answer to that kind of argument would just be a simple saying, well, it's just a story, and there's no evidence. We have no real, very little evidence to say at all to say that the story is true. And besides the fact that like a lot of religious texts, it requires interpretation by usually a lot of people to really understand it want interpretation by, like, a priest or a pastor to help them explain it. What does that tell you? Like, most stories, even like fairy tales, like Aron Ra has numerous times describe the Bible as, don't require really that much interpretation to understand them. So that tells you something there.
Just to be extra clear, I have said that the Bible is a compilation of fantasy, folklore, myths, and legends. Genesis 1 to 1, well, the first few chapters of Genesis easily are literally fairy tales. You know, they talk about magical enchantments and animals who talk and act like people in a mystical location and all of that folklorish nonsense. So it's amazing to me that anybody can read something that is so obviously metaphorical and try to interpret that as if it's literal. It's stunning to me how stupid people can be when they need to believe something so badly, even when they know it's not true. And I've had a handful of people, not a lot, not all of them, to be fair, very few people have admitted this to me, but a few have admitted that they know it's not true, but they believe it anyway.
Right.
Wow.
So what you're saying, Aron, is that when it comes to the Bible, the section of the Bible that has the most fairy tale elements, although there's obviously others, mainly when it comes to Jesus and like the story of like the resurrection mainly, and maybe some, and probably a lot of Revelation, is Genesis is the main part where it's all fairy tale. The rest is a lot harder to refute because it sounds more plausible. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think Revelations is where somebody accidentally got some PCP in their weed before they began to write.
Well, I'll say it doesn't take drugs to do that. We have lots and lots of examples actually. I mean, I guess it could just, you could just say that everybody's doing tons of peyote. I don't think it's necessary, but yeah, it's just it's a literary genre. It's a style of writing. It's part of the way that ancient people thought about literature at this time period, right? Is that it's kind of magical. In the first place, it was mysterious to most people because they couldn't read or write.
Yeah,
It was controlled by the priesthood.
Seth, I apologize. I realize you're calling in on a phone, but your breath is coming through really clearly.
Or the wind, maybe.
Can you adjust for that, please? Thank you.
Oh, sorry. I think that's probably because I had a fan running.
No,
Oh,
no
okay.
worries. No worries. Kipp, continue,
so
please.
Yeah, so it's people are it's mysterious, right? Writing's mysterious. It's controlled in many places by the temple and the ruling religious class. So it looks magical. It's promoted as kind of magical. This is where ideas about the text becoming cryptic ciphers for predicting the future. Like we see lots of this in and around the time period. What like somebody like the writer of the Gospel of Matthew is doing when he's just pulling texts from the Old Testament completely out of their context and attempting to apply them and use them as ways of explaining the life of Jesus. We have lots of examples of this exact same thing from other writers talking about different things because they thought that all this ancient literature was like a code book. It was Bible code basically back in the first century. So the book of Revelation looks a lot like other texts, other Jewish texts like the War Scroll or the books of Enoch or the Book of Jubilees or the Sibylline oracles, many of these other really fairly dense cryptic kind of texts that feature these elaborate fantastic visions and symbols of what as ways of decoding, I guess, what's going to happen in the future. So
I hope you forgive me, Kipp. I want to intercede something.
Yeah, of course.
Just to be clear, so that people understand what I'm saying. different books of the Bible were written very differently. Now, a lot of people will present the idea that there's 66 books of the Bible. There's actually a whole fuck ton more than that.
Depends on, yeah.
But human editors have gleaned an awful lot out of it. Right. So now, for whatever reason, the infallible, inalterable Word of God refers to books that were later decided by human editors were only the word of man. Now, why would the Word of God refer to the word of man? Especially books that no longer exist, that we know that human editors have omitted deliberately and then destroyed. So you can't even read them anymore. But the Word of God, who sees everything, knows everything, still refers to and advises that you should read those other works that God should know doesn't exist. Some of these books were written as actual fables, like a story with a folklorish tale with a moral at the end, right? And so some of them are literally fairy tales. They have the magical enchantments, they have the talking animals and all that, and everything is obviously a metaphor for something else.
Yeah.
Every time that the Bible says, and it does say a lot of times, the fruit of, it's talking about the result of actions taken or decisions made. Except in Genesis is the only time that that readers try to interpret that literally, that it's a literal fruit. Right? Everywhere else it's metaphorical, but only here we're going to treat it literally. But Revelation was not written that way. So a lot of these books were written for the story of it, even though it's in Genesis, the story of I think it's Joseph and his brothers with the multicolored coat and all that. That's a completely different type of tale.
Yeah, scholars would call that a novella quite often.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's very different than the flood and the Tower of Babel, and some of those are fables, some of those are fairy tales. Is a completely different compilation. Some of these are urban legends. And some of these, I don't know what the best way to describe them is fever dreams. I don't know. When you get into Revelation, that is more like if you were alive in the 60s and tried to interpret all of the Beatles songs as if they secretly meant secret messages to you. So now the reason I say this is because I was a little kid in Los Angeles. I have personally met the Manson family 3 times.
I've heard you say that before, yes.
So, yeah, my mother, we used to go to Griffith Park. They were always down there. But anyway, I've run into the Manson family myself, personally, at least 3 times.
That had to be a trip.
Remember, I'm a little kid, so I didn't understand anything. Wondering why these women have shaved heads and swastikas carved into their foreheads between their eyes, yelling at me through a car window as I'm driving through downtown. That's what my clearest memory of them.
That's wild.
But the thing is,
wow.
Manson was convinced that the Beatles were the biblical 4 horsemen of the apocalypse that all had not the 4 horsemen,
I remember
but they had hair like women. And they were locusts. Well, of course, that means beetle, right? And so he had a girlfriend named...
It just doesn't...
I can't believe I never caught that before. That makes so much sense. I can't believe I didn't catch that.
So I read Vincent Bugliosi's... it's my favorite book that I've probably ever read. Vincent Bugliosi, who was the prosecuting attorney, who... explored the whole thing about the Manson family and the prosecution thereof. And his book, Helter Skelter, was amazing for how the Manson family worked in the way that they interpreted the Bible and a number of other things, and how they used sex as a mind control device and all of this. But it's a bizarre exploration, but I realize Revelation is more in line with fucking Manson than the people who wrote Genesis. The people collective who assembled different tropes, and so this story of Enki and Ereshkigal and Ninti, the daughter of the rib, and the story of Adapa, the first man. These are all interesting tropes. We should just include these as our culture does, all into one tale, and everybody will understand that when we're saying this, we really mean that, because our culture understands that this is what we really mean. But Revelation is built is entirely different. It's much more like the 60s psychedelic movement, where everybody thought that Paul McCartney was dead and replaced by an exact duplicate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let me summarize what you're trying to say here, Aron, if I'm understanding it correctly, because I think what I was trying to get at just now was I was trying to understand how much of the Bible is fairy tale, but how where the Bible can fool more people into thinking that the stories seem more plausible. So you're saying that essentially, even when it's not fairy tale, it's fable. It's some kind of it's a different kind of story that's a fable, but it's not exactly a fairy tale. And then Revelation is just somebody got drunk, either had a crazy dream or was on drugs and had a crazy dream.
I think, and a bit possibly of psychosis involved in that. But I can't say that Genesis entirely is fairy tale or fable.
Oh,
Some parts of it are. But the tale of Joseph, the tale of Jacob wrestling God, these are different types of stories from
Okay.
their tradition that just ended up being integrated into this compilation in a weird way.
we
So
can see actually,
Okay. Now
the
I
we
think
only
I'm
can,
understanding
actual
it better.
the only actual fairy tales in the Bible are in Genesis.
Okay.
Other
That
things
makes more
are
sense.
maybe urban legends and that sort of thing. Like I think I've talked to a number of biblical historians. They've all agreed that Moses never existed, and that
Right.
even rabbinical scholars have confessed to their own congregations that the Exodus did not happen the way the Bible describes, if it happened at all. But that doesn't
Mhm.
mean it's a fairy tale. That just means that it's
Right.
more in the urban legend kind of a
Yeah.
category.
I would
Okay. So
we even
basically,
have like sorry, I was just going to point out that we even have earlier versions of some of these stories extant within other parts of the Bible. Hosea 12 is a really, really interesting text, which, by the way, the book of Genesis is quite late. It's one of the later books written of the Hebrew Bible. I
You got
think,
to clarify
it
that,
was
because I know people who think that the book of Genesis is the oldest book ever writ.
absolutely not. It's very late, and there's ways in which we can investigate the text of what's in Genesis to demonstrate that it's very late. And I'm talking, as late as the third century, maybe even the second century BCE. It's still being worked on. There's still work being done in it, but it's complicated, right? Because it is, as you point out, Aaron, a collection of a lot of these older stories and tropes and traditions that are being stitched together. There's all sorts of different kinds of sources that are at work here. I'm going to point out that in a place like Hosea 12, which was probably written hundreds of years earlier than that, we see echoes of some of the same stories of Jacob and Esau. Jacob wrestling with a god in that story. Appears in Hosea 12. Jacob having to labor for his uncle Laban in order to acquire two women is in that is in Hosea chapter 12. We even have what I think is probably really early Exodus traditions, which feature not a charismatic leader by the name of Moses, but just an anonymous prophet who leads the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. So it's yeah. Genesis is in actual fact, it's a lot of people's favorite Old Testament book because it's a great book because it's fiction, entirely from start to finish. It's a mix of a whole bunch of these really really fun, in many respects what can be a lot of fun stories, fables and fairy tales and things like that.
Yeah,
But
if I may just reiterate what you just said, Genesis has not one word of literal historical truth to it.
certainly not. Although I will point out, um, I like to point at something like the story of the Tower of Babel, for this, because I think you can look at a text like Genesis and still imagine the historical location for it, and maybe even glean some uh second secondary subliminal history from it. A
So
story like
you're
the
referring to Hammurabi's failure to construct the Marduk ziggurat.
no, well, the name of the tower is Enki, which is the foundation platform of heaven and earth. It might have been built by Hammurabi, but we don't know. The
Is this
Babylonians
the
thought
same
it
tower?
was.
Is this the same tower that Nebuchadnezzar, centuries later, tried to continue and also failed?
No, no, no. I mean, as far as we know, he successfully renovated it. He actually he actually commemorated it. We have a stone. There's a stele that actually commemorates his completion of it.
Completion.
So yeah.
This is
So, but
completely new to me.
really, well, at the Scoia'tain
Nebuchadnezzar
collection,
Nebuchadnezzar completed the ziggurat that Hammurabi started.
if it was Hammurabi. But yes, the old ziggurat named Enki, was, and maybe a better word is renovated. It was the renovations were begun by his father Nabopolassar, and he carried them on, and then issued a marker, a stele, to commemorate his completion of it. It's called the Tower of Babel stele. It's in. I actually think more recently been repatriated to the nation of Iraq, but for a long time it was owned by the Skøyen collection. I got to see it on a regular basis when I worked for the Skøyen collection in Norway. But
Envy.
yeah, I've done some fun things. So the really cool thing about the marker, about the Tower of Babel stele, is it tells us, Nebuchadnezzar, speaking in the first person, tells us that he built a tower, whose top reached into the sky, it pierced the heavens. He talks about mobilizing people from all corners of the earth to come together for this great project, and how, they worked in harmony together. And it was only through his political genius and power that he was able to mobilize so many people to do this. That the text tells us that it was built of bricks, fired bricks, and bitumen, which is, and all these things are fairly interesting, because this is all stuff that is echoed in the story of the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11. Some of the descriptions are basically verbatim. And the story in Genesis 11 too, it kind of functions like a polemic, right? It's the message of Genesis 11 is not gathering yourselves together and forming civilizations, but spreading out, getting out there, staying away from each other, in much direct confrontation to Nebuchadnezzar's entire project. So I like to think that the people who wrote this story watched this happen, saw Nebuchadnezzar undertaking these large renovation projects like this one, and saw the marker, even maybe saw the stele, echoed some of the language that's on the stele, and reproduced it in their own text, but as a way to, kind of thumb your nose at the great king.
May I please give you my interpretation of this?
Yeah, for sure.
There's two of them. One is that when they started the Tower of Babel, the Mesopotamian Empire was still in power. They had classes teaching children how to read and write in cuneiform. I completely said that wrong.
Cuneiform.
Yeah,
That's fine.
but anyway, they were teaching, reading and writing. They had schools and all of this. And so they begin this project. But then the Mesopotamia basically collapsed and the schools closed. The building never got finished. And then later on, we have these traditions that are being repeated or recited verbally, which means that there are some embellishments thrown in here or there because people, you could train people to not embellish or enhance or speculate, but they're going to. So over the course of 1,000 years before the Phoenicians get involved or whatever, now the stories are, but by the time they're written down again, they've changed. And now we get into Nag Hammadi's, or excuse me, not Nag Hammadi, Ashurbanipal's library, and we see what the original stories were like. We realize how much they've changed. But the one takeaway that I could say from this is, when people lost the ability to write, they can no longer communicate what was the real truth of the story. But the other aspect of this is that what was God's involvement in this? Think about God created one people, they spread across the earth, and then God starts picking favorites out of his own children. Right, so now God has become a racist over some of the people he created because of where they moved on after that. And the thing that you would think that a loving God would want to do for his people is when God remarks that, look at this tower they're building. There's nothing they can't do if they work together. This is the moment when God should be proud of his people. But then God says, let's put an end to that shit. Look how they're accomplishing great things by working together. Let's make sure they can't ever work together again. Let me confuse their language.
Yeah,
God is
and the whole story being because supposedly that and the general times I've heard the story is from the Christian perspective is, they were building the tower to heaven to reach God, and they're not, and somehow God says you're not supposed, and God's like, you're not supposed to be able to do that,
that's what Yahweh says right in the story,
or you're not supposed to do that. And I'm not just thinking, you're God. Why would if you're God the way Christians and people of that time describe you as this transcendent being, how outside of space, time, and everything, how can they reach you anyway?
Yeah.
What's the
See, this is
so Seth, I've been very, very I've been happy to entertain you for all this time because we didn't have any other callers and you did have good questions, bring up good topics, and I'm really glad of where we went. But we do have another
I thank you so much for because actually I think you guys have helped me refine my arguments against other Christians, especially family members or other people that I know, because I feel that one of the common easiest arguments against the Bible, like Professor Dave, for example, Dave Farina says some books that a thing. I think the problem with that, as good as an argument it is, that's just not going to satisfy the average Christian. So I want a bit of a more nuanced argument, and I think you guys have helped me help that in this discussion.
Thank you very much for sharing that.
Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks. Have a good night.
Right, so we're going to pick up this other caller, our second caller of the evening.
Hey, can I before we start? There's something in the chat I wanted to address quickly, if I'm allowed. Somebody asked about Jesus growing up and attending the synagogue every Sabbath, and it says Jesus Yeshua grew up and attended that. That would be the Aramaic or Hebrew name That's transliterated into Greek as Jesus. Grew up attending the synagogue every Sabbath and grew up as a Jew. So what is so hard to understand about him learning the Old Testament scriptures? I think it's and this is there's a distinction here I think we need to pick up on. Learning the scriptures is not the same as learning how to read and recite the scriptures. If he was in synagogue, he was hearing them, not reading them. It's a crucial difference, and the ways in which people had a tendency to take in this information and then reconstitute it and help it, use it to shape their own ideas, would be through rhetorical strategies, basically, not through literary strategies.
That's very interesting, because growing up, I don't think I ever heard any pastor talk about Jesus going to synagogue. That was not those. If that's in the Bible in text, that was never discussed.
And I'll say one other thing on that point. This is troublesome. There's so much nuance in terms of the way we do scholarship. Synagogues we're still not even clear about how widespread they were at the time, even in the first century CE. We knew they were in existence, that there were certainly synagogues throughout the Mediterranean. We just have no idea how many. We have no idea how common it was for people to not all Jews went to synagogue. I mean, and they not all Jews thought that synagogues were the right way to perform and practice their religions either. So,
and coincidentally, even today, we could still say hashtag not all Jews. I feel we need to.
Yeah, you know what? I don't know if any of you guys have Jewish friends. I have a whole bunch, but it's almost impossible to get them to agree about anything. So,
oh, by the way, before I go, I wanted to mention, Aron, I would love to see you have a discussion with comedian Lewis Black, who is a Jewish comedian, because he's
I would love that myself.
Sort of an atheist. He's sort of an atheist, but he wrote an entire book called Me of Little Faith. That would be amazing if you could talk to that guy. I think that would be a really entertaining show.
I don't know the man, and I'm almost certain he doesn't know me. But if a conversation like that could be arranged, I'd be happy to take part.
That would be so cool to have you converse with Lewis Black.
All right, Seth, thank you very much.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good night, and we're gonna talk to. Let me see. Is this Ed in Maryland? Have I got that right? Ed, can you hear me?
Maryland.
Very good. How are things in Maryland?
Well, it's great in Maryland. How are you guys doing?
All right.
Doing well.
So, what is it you wanted to say to us today?
Okay, I've been listening to these, the line for a while, and I've never heard the reason that I have against religion. I know I've heard of all the arguments, but I've never heard the one that I am going to tell you.
Please, let's hear it.
Let's hear it.
Okay, it has to do with like people's grip on reality. And
hold on a second. We've got some complaints about the audio. Is there anything you can do to say this more clearly? It sounds a little muffled.
How about now?
Oh,
much better. Much better. Thank you.
Okay, that's good. So what I was saying was it has to do with our grip on reality, and because I've been watching a lot of body cam footage, how police, how people get the police body cam footage when there's murders. So I've been watching the reactions of the people when they actually catch them, and like when they're about to bring them in, a lot of times you hear them talking about like spirits and God, and they're religious, and the fact that the fact that they were brought up, you know, religious, or that religion exists in the first place, the fact that they think that voices in their head can be real cause deaths. And I've never heard anyone bring that up before. So I wanted to know what you thought.
I don't know what to say about that. Your motivation for not believing. Could you paraphrase that for me? Because I don't think I understood it.
No, it's not my reason for not believing, but it's a big reason for not believing.
Okay.
It's like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, and I was looking it up, like there's so many homicides per year related to schizophrenia and psychosis. And then when you look at that, if they actually talk to the people who committed the homicides, they can, you know, if they say, oh, I was hearing spirits, or I was hearing demons, or God told me to do it, you can break that down into a certain percentage. And that's the ones that we can confirm. We don't know how many random killings there are every year, or homicides that are related to people's, you know, a false grip on reality. And the fact that they were allowed to grow up thinking that.
There are people that I've known personally in real life, face-to-face discussions with people people that I could call and visit and all of that, and been to their house and they've been to mine, all that. And I come to find out that they believe all kinds of wackadoodle shit that they insist that I agree with, or that I said, but just not in public. It's in a private conversation where I said or admitted all of these crazy things. I'm like, I never said any of that. And if there's no recording of it, then I suggest you stop telling people I said this, because I definitely didn't.
Right, because and they're just hearing things, or they're hearing what their mind tells them to hear, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's scary. And I almost think that is when people are growing up, like, you need to be, like, in school, you need to be taught that you can hear voices in your head. And if you do hear voices in your head, you know, one, it's your conscience and it's fine. Everybody, I mean, a lot of people have a voice in their head. But
how do you address the thing about,
father.
you know, the old adage that if you talk to God, that's prayer. If God talks to you, that's schizophrenia.
Oh, I've never heard that, but that's funny.
It's one of my favorite sayings. But I know a couple of people who are legitimate schizophrenic, who thought they were talking to God. And it's really hard to reason with these people, because a mental disorder like that has a self-defense mechanism. So that it's very difficult to reason with somebody whose reason faculties are so badly inhibited. And it doesn't matter how much you care about the person.
Right.
It's just hard. I mean, I had a conversation with an old friend who was interrupted by two other people who did not exist, because he's having to interrupt me to tell two other people to shut up while I'm talking. And what I'm trying to tell my friend is, there's only the two of us here, dude. There's just you and me, and the other two people you're talking to, they're not here. How do you get them to understand? He sees them. He hears them interject. How am I supposed to override what he's personally experiencing?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm sorry for calling and bringing this up, but, you know, because it is sort of like it's a down conversation, but I've never heard it before. Yeah. And it is kind of fun if you want to start watching, like, the body cam videos. It is interesting, but it can get scary, and you'll see how many people are actually, you know, that are mentally ill, and they blame it on, I mean, not whatever. The root of it is, what if we could teach these people that, you know, it's the fact that the supernatural exists to them in the first place. That's why they got into the situation where they can listen to the voices in their head, because they think the supernatural exists. It doesn't exist. There's reality.
It's an interesting. It's an interesting ethical question that you cannot, and you know that I'm a hardline materialist. There is no such thing as the supernatural. But
Right.
ethically, am I in a position to make a blanket statement that to just teach people that if you're hearing voices that you think are an extraterrestrial telepath trying to communicate with you, or whatever, this is God trying to speak to you, whatever, that because I say so, that you can automatically discount that. Now, I may think myself personally, I may think that's absolutely correct, but ethically, shouldn't I be limited in what I can do to prohibit somebody else's impression or interpretation? I'm open to
Well,
limiting
yeah,
myself on what I can tell other people about that.
yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, you got a great point. But then, like, I guess, like, it's not to the point where it's a, I guess it's not to the point where it's like, well, hey, I know this guy who, he killed 3 people because of this. It's not that big of a problem yet, I guess. I guess if it ever gets to be that big of a problem where, people with psychosis, it's a bigger thing, I guess then maybe we would have some justification. But I guess it's not that big of a deal yet.
Yeah, it's the ethics of some. I have no idea about psychology or psychiatry. I'm certainly speaking outside of my realm here. But I mean, I've known people that have had issues like this where they've had conversations with people that aren't there. It's virtually impossible to reason with them because the delusion has a self-protection mechanism so that they're convinced when I try to reason with them that the reason that I'm trying to reason with them is because I'm somehow the enemy in all of this. And there's a lot of nuance to consider, and I'm well outside of my realm, even talking about this right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sorry to bring it up then if it was a weird thing to bring up,
If I hadn't had personal experience with it, I might have a completely different take.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think you're right. You made me think about it differently. You're saying we don't really have, we don't know. You're saying, let me just make sure. You're saying we don't know if we don't have the grounds to say that we are certain 100% that the supernatural does not exist. So we can't just teach people in school that, as they're growing up, the supernatural does not exist. If you're hearing voices, is that what you're sort of saying?
Conversely, we can say that there's no evidence of a thing, but that doesn't mean that necessarily that the thing cannot exist. That's the
Right.
step I don't want to take. So if you can't show that there's a support for the thing that you're asserting, well, then I don't have to accept it. You've given me nothing that will compel me. And it's enough for me that if you can't show me the truth of it, then there's no truth of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a lie.
Right.
There's a subtlety there.
Well, how many times in history has a voice ever been true? Is that what, you know what I mean? To a person.
Not
they
one
killed somebody
time.
and then they were like,
there's not one time of telepath or communication with your dead ancestors. The Lord Xenu has never reached out to anybody. There's no been a Vulcan mind meld. Not one of those times. But not having the evidence for is not necessarily proof against.
right.
I like the rule that if you can't show me the truth of it, then there is no truth of it. We've got nothing else to discuss. If you don't have any evidence to indicate that it is, then I'm perfectly justified in deciding that it isn't. I can't make a formal ruling about that, but I'm certainly not going to believe something if you can't show me a reason to believe it. Having no reason to believe something is a perfectly good reason not to believe it.
And we just try to get help for these people if we get them on medicine.
Yeah, and sadly, here in the United States, that's harder to do than it sounds.
Right. Especially with the homeless community.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't want to say anything more about that because it's getting a little too close to home now.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, sorry about that. I apologize.
Nothing to apologize for.
Yeah,
Kipp,
thank
do
you
you
for
have
taking my
anything to
call,
say on
though.
that?
I do not.
I was in a car with a friend of mine. We're going down the road. When I say a car, you have to remember who you're talking to. It wasn't a car. I'm I'm driving in an old V8 with headers and glass packs on oversized mud tires down the freeway. This thing is loud. We're driving at night in the rain, all kinds of noise. So there's the engine noise, the tire noise, the storm noise, all of that. We're going down the freeway. How loud is that? My friend is convinced that a person inside their car, it's raining, their windows are up, our windows are up. He's convinced that the person who is not even looking at him and can't see him anyway is somehow throwing their voice. They're a ventriloquist, as he thinks everybody in the country is a ventriloquist. And that if he were to move to Asia, they wouldn't all be ventriloquists. He thinks everybody in the United States is a ventriloquist, but people in Asia are not. But there's somebody in a car next to us going down the freeway at 60, 70 miles an hour, and they're throwing their voice at him. And I have to remind him, dude, you are a very black person at night in a car where there is no light. I promise you, they cannot even see you. I have to yell at you from sitting next to you inside the same car in order for you to hear me. How the fuck could they be in a different car and be subtly under their lips ventriloquizing themselves? I'm having to yell at you. I'm sitting right here. But there's no reason that gets through with a mental disorder. You follow me?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, you can't. You think no matter how much you try. Yeah, it's sad. It's scary and sad.
Yeah, that was a disturbing experience for me. That I want to help this person, and there's just not a damn thing I can do, and despite all my efforts to get him help, to get him to people who would help him. There was always a legal loophole because this is the United States.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, well, thank you for that.
Well, I can't believe I got to talk to you, Aron. I've been watching you forever. I can't believe I got to talk to you. So thank you for taking my call.
Thank you kindly. Our guest tonight was Kipp,
forever.
not me. So I apologize.
That's cool.
All right. Well, I do have another caller lined up. So
can I?
Yes, Kipp, please.
Oh no, I was just gonna, before taking the next caller, I saw a question in the chat that I thought would be interesting to address as well, if I could.
Go ahead.
Okay,
please.
I'll let you guys go. See you later.
All right.
Thank you kindly. Bye-bye.
So,
bye-bye. Thank you.
Kiastar 67 asked, does the term Messiah mean an anointed one? And this is where, I mean, people get confused about some of this stuff, because the term on its own is just the general meaning of the Hebrew word Mashiach just means anointed one, and it was applied in the Old Testament to mostly kings, occasionally prophets, and also quite often to priests. And this is one of the funny things about language, right? But this is consistent with just language generally, is that the meanings of words will change and they'll develop over time. And we're witnessing this kind of in real time within the biblical text, because they're separated by quite a bit of temporal distance. There's a lot of, some are hundreds of years older than other ones. And you see this at work within the texts, and then within, later Jewish literature, where this term Mashiach comes to mean slightly different things. Within the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's applied most commonly to just referring to like the Hebrew prophets, like the people who they thought wrote the scriptures. They called them anointed ones, and always used it in the plural that way. Over time, though, it did come to mean this person who they thought was going to come in and usher in the kingdom of God, and this was almost certainly just a normal. Yeah, most Jews thought this was just a normal human being who would have this special um, selection by God to perform this specific task. So it's a good question though. And I think it's better when people understand the, the full spectrum of meaning that gets applied to it.
We have one other caller, and he has a question specific to the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Oh, go
And
ahead.
since I am more of an expert on this, then I will go ahead and field that question for you. However, he's in Texas, and his name is Jeremiah, and I think that I might be housing one of his snakes.
Oh, cool.
You, in fact, are.
See, I was thinking of a different Jeremiah, and I was getting excited about that. That's cool. I'm happy to talk to you too.
She's doing very well.
Sorry, Kipp, to disappoint.
I know.
Well, thank you, Aron. And once again, I'm calling the line not to talk to you, but to talk to your co-host. So,
Brilliant.
yeah. Anyway, so to get into it, I got into a conversation with family who's Christian, of course, and the Dead Sea Scrolls came up, and they told me, and it's been a while, so I'm hoping I'm remembering this right, but essentially that the Dead Sea Scrolls were evidence of the Gospels, that there was New Testament material in them. And I, of course, immediately said, wait, no, there isn't. Sorry, I'm out for a walk, car noise. But
You're
anyway,
good.
so I told them,
Totally
wait,
good.
no, there isn't. But I wanted to talk to someone who knows a lot more about them than I do and see if that's actually true. Is there any New Testament material in the scrolls?
Yeah, no, there is none. Now I suspect where this is coming from is probably some 20, maybe it's 30 years ago by now. When was the 90s? That was like 30 years ago. No, I think, wasn't it? So
30 years ago was the mid-90s.
It was
Yeah.
just after the 80s.
That's I remember all. Well, I remember a lot of it. So but after a lot of the Dead Sea Scrolls were first published in the 1990s, there's a handful. Most of them are written in Hebrew. There's a whole bunch that are written in Aramaic, and then there's a small little bit fragments surviving in Greek. Interestingly, a lot of the Greek fragments came from just this one cave. There's the Dead Sea Scrolls usually refers to these 11 caves in the vicinity of the site of Qumran, which yielded manuscripts. So one of the caves, Cave 7, was just exclusively Greek manuscripts. And there's a small fragment that came out of Cave 7, and a scholar forwarded the suggestion that he wrote an article about it and everything, and he said that this was a first century copy of the Gospel of Mark. There's only, one completely legible word on the fragment. There's bits of various other words that appear on the fragment over, I think it's 4 lines, and he reconstructed the text to match something in Mark. Unfortunately, problematically, the only visible word on the fragment I believe, was the word autein, which is the Greek word. It just means her, right? So it's hard to align a text on the basis of just that, right? It's very, very difficult. You could almost fit that into anything. So one of my mentors, the late Professor Peter Flint, wrote a very good article. It's not a peer-reviewed article, but it's a very, very good article that was published in the Biblical Archaeology Review, where he showed pretty convincingly that this was certainly not a copy of the Gospel of Mark, which would have been like incredible to have not just a copy of a gospel text in the caves of Qumran in Judea there, but also to have a copy of any Christian manuscript that dates back to the 1st century. We have none. So the my mentor, Professor Peter Flint, pretty convincingly demonstrated that this is not a copy of a gospel text or any New Testament text, and what it probably actually is a fragment from a text of maybe First Enoch, written in Greek. First Enoch is a Jewish text that was very, very popular in the 1st century.
I'm vaguely familiar with some of the Apocrypha.
Yeah.
I haven't read them, but I know about First Enoch. So
First Enoch is quoted actually
really cool.
by the author of Jude in the New Testament. He seemed to think it was pretty important. So, but that's what the fragment is. It gets there. For a while there was this idea put out there, right? Like that there was New Testament material in the Dead Sea Scrolls that's entirely false. But lots of Christian apologists are slow on the uptake, or are slow to get more contemporary information. They're usually all working 30 years behind us anyways. So it's unsurprising that these sorts of things continue to get propagated on those sorts of circles. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's cool that just on its own, I think it's cool that there's a text of Greek Enoch from the 1st century in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's interesting on its own. So
very. And I love that you anticipated my follow-up question and elaborated an answer on it. Because my follow-up was going to be, where would they have gotten that? So.
Oh yeah.
But you answered that quite handedly.
Yeah. So
thank you very much
I'll
for
just
that.
expand. Yeah, of course. I'll just expand on this a little bit and point out, like, the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in between 1947 and 1956. It took a very long time for them to be published. They weren't all published until, all officially published. The publication project wrapped up finally in the year 2011. But up until like the late 80s and early 90s, there was almost nothing available to anybody, and it was frustrating for scholars. It was frustrating for the general public. It created all these conspiracy theories about the Catholic Church trying to suppress information and keep dangerous things under wraps. Mostly it was just a problem of funding, as these things tend to go. But when they were finally available to the public, as this stuff started to filter out in the 1990s, something that happened was I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of stuff in the Dead Sea Scrolls which looks similar to things that appear in the writings of Paul and in the Gospels in terms of the theology. It got a lot of people really excited about, potential overlaps with Christianity, and it produced a whole bunch of early scholarship. And this is the 1990s, and this is the kind of stuff that I was cutting my teeth on when I started my academic career. Long story short, over the course of the next few decades, we have all managed to collect our heads and gathered our wits about us, and come to recognize that actually, no, these texts almost have absolutely nothing to do with Christianity, and actually help us to understand and to see a wider world of Second Temple Jewish belief and practice.
Okay. That was very interesting to hear. I'm glad I called with that question.
Awesome. Yeah, me too.
All right. Well, I don't have anything else for you, so I'll go ahead and hang up unless you have something you want to say to me.
Thanks for calling in.
Yep, yep. Thank you for calling in. I want
You're
to see if
welcome.
we have any other. We don't. We don't have any other callers, and I believe they're about to close the lines.
Aron, what
Oh.
did you do to your microphone?
Yeah, something happened there.
Hello.
Well,
Oh, you did do something. It doesn't sound right.
But thanks,
Really?
Jeremiah. We appreciate you.
I'll leave you guys to vamp and fix your technical problems, and hopefully someone else calls in before you guys close the lines, because I'm liking this show.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good night, guys.
All right, let me see what I can do.
Did you accidentally switch your audio?
I don't know.
On,
I don't. Does it still sound bad?
Yeah,
It
it sounds like you
does.
unplugged it and it switched to a different microphone or something.
Yeah.
Let me check that real quick. I mean, the dog was just down here, and he
Oh.
likes to force himself in where he doesn't fit, just to be close.
They'll do
Just like a man.
that.
All right, so
Touche.
Kipp, rant for a minute, would you?
Rant for a minute. Oh God, the pressure is on while Aron fixes his microphone. So, I mean, something I can rant about is you guys notice how there's these really popular right-wing bro dude podcasts that like to feature so-called authorities about early Christianity or early religion or the Bible who clearly have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And the bro dudes, because they're dumb, they just nod along and they agree and they go, oh yeah, absolutely, that's very interesting. And I don't know. It bugs me a lot. It's been bugging me a lot lately. I just reviewed on my own channel with a good friend of mine, Dr. Dan McClellan, a show that was released for Easter with a hack by the name of Jeremiah J. Johnston, talking about all the fabulous proof of the resurrection. Which was based almost entirely on the evidence from the Shroud of Turin. It's frustrating to see people like this enter the space and get like 1 million, 2 million views from unsuspecting people who most of whom don't know any better. And there's unfortunately, I think, not enough pushback on the propagation of misinformation like this. That's a lot of what I feel like I'm doing here in my own work, trying to push back on a lot of this misinformation, which just seems to be on the increase. How's it going, Aron? Did you figure it out?
It seems that my dog did, in fact, unplug my microphone.
Oh dear. Is that
and although the mechanics of it is still lit,
it doesn't seem to have picked up the Zoom.
In the Zoom call, do you need to switch back to that input on the microphone settings?
That's what I'm trying to do now. I apologize for the technical difficulty. So again, rant. You're the expert.
I want to ask a question, Dr.
Yeah,
Kipp.
go ahead.
What is like the most pet peeve, like, misconception about the Old Testament for you? Like, given that you know like the different translations and everything.
Just one. The biggest pet peeve that I have, misconception about the Old Testament. It's so boy. I mean, there's a lot. It's hard to settle in on one. I'll say this. I think I get okay. Here's a good one. I get frustrated by how much how much people want to make decisions about what they should read so-called literally versus what they should read so-called figuratively. when they approach the text, and they usually do this on the basis of what they consider to be credulous or incredulous about the literature, and it's not necessarily a natural way of understanding the text. I mean, as an example, I'm going to be doing another show here on Wednesday where I will be speaking to I'll be talking with a like a flat Earth debunker, a guy who's out there, promoting good science about about the shape of the Earth, about about things that we know without a shadow of a doubt about our world, and but also thinks that this is something that can be supported by the biblical text, and on the basis of like this sort of thing, where this doesn't match with my experience or perspective of reality, therefore this must be an exaggeration, or therefore this must be a metaphor, or we must take this figuratively. And that's not to say that there isn't figurative stuff that's in the Old Testament. There certainly is. I just tend to think that when it comes to reading these texts from the perspective of the people who wrote and collected them, that we need to be really careful about making this sharp distinction. So, and in fact, there are plenty of times where I think stuff that appears to us to be more literal or historical. Sorry, let's put this the other way. I think stuff that appears to us that we should be reading it as more figurative. Sometimes I think, yeah, I don't know. I think there's very much an expectation that the people who wrote this actually thought that the stars in the sky were the literal armies of God who were just waiting up there for him to say the word, so that they would come down and fight his wars and his battles for them. So yeah, but I have a lot of frustrations. That's one of them.
I feel like that's a broad kind of like, people cherry pick the Bible, and that's frustrating no matter what part of the Bible they're cherry picking.
You pick your favorite texts, you pick your favorite ideas, you assume, and we all do this, right? I think we assume that what sounds good to us, what sounds right to us, is the actual is the intended meaning of the text. Like, one of the big problems of this is it's very, very ancient literature, and most of us are reading it through translations that have been contemporized, and when you do that, you're always missing nuance. Like, this is part of why I love teaching people to read Hebrew, which is something anybody can do. By the way, I teach courses regularly. I have a new one actually starting at the end of May. But it's a great way, if you're that deeply into understanding what the Bible is about. It's a phenomenal way to do it, and it really opens up a lot of aspects of the text that just do not translate into any language. I think it makes it more cool. So, Aron is he restarting his computer? Is that what?
I think so.
What's happening here?
He's left the Zoom call, so I think he's I think he's trying to reboot.
Well, here I am. I hadn't banked on this, but here I am.
It's possible we might have to. Well, I mean, I guess I was getting close to possibly closing the lines anyway. We do have one caller who called in. I see you, Maureen. It just depends on whether we get Aron back, and if not, then we might have to just be like, okay, bye.
Oh, okay, all right. Yeah, that's cool.
Feel free to plug your stuff. You've got a class coming up. Where can people find you?
Sure. So I'm starting a new class that will be on the religion department, which is the company, the web platform that's operated by the religion for breakfast people. So I'll be teaching a 12-week course in Hebrew that's called Learn Hebrew through the Book of Jonah, where I will be teaching how to read Hebrew and then actually developing those skills over the course of 12 weeks, where people will be able to read all of Jonah chapter 1, which is just a fun. This is, a fairy tale, as Aron would call it, and it's just a fun story about a guy who got swallowed by a fish and probably died in there and then was resurrected from the dead again. One of the things about the Bible, if you read it enough, you understand that resurrection is actually pretty common. It's not something that is especially unique. It certainly happened more than once, if the text is to be believed. So there's that. I also teach regularly through Digital Hammurabi, which is owned and operated by my good friends, Megan Lewis and Dr. Joshua Bowen. So Dr. Josh and I alternate through teaching Hebrew, and you can learn other languages there too, like Sumerian and Coptic. I believe there's efforts to get Greek on the platform as well. My own channel is just my name, Kipp Davis. I stream every Friday at 2:00 in the afternoon Pacific, 5:00 Eastern. It always has something to do with the Bible. Sometimes I do a 2-hour teaching session. Viewers have suggested that it's like getting free grad school. But I also do lots of response videos to bad apologetics online, and I write books. I've recently published this book, which is called God's Propaganda: Pulling Back the Curtain on What the Bible Wants You to See. So this was based on a course I used to teach at universities for a number of years, which was called Israelite Religions, and the book is an exploration of the religious and the historical world behind the Old Testament, delving into the things that are actually going on there, and then also showing how the text creatively developed these things into forms of propaganda to promote various different ideologies that were at work for the people who wrote and collected this literature. And one of the fun things we discover about it is that certainly the people who wrote and collected the Old Testament text did not agree with each other about many, many, many things. So a careful reader will be able to see that there are actually diverse pictures of different things, and even the gods whom they worshipped in the old Israelite kingdoms. So,
well, I'm gonna text
okay,
Aron.
I think we're done with the calls, eh?
Yeah, well, I've at least suspended new calls. We've got one in the bank. If Aron comes back, we will talk to Maureen for a minute. But yeah, I'm going to text Aron and see if I can save him from whatever's going on. Or maybe we'll just, I'll acknowledge the super chats that we've gotten and then wrap maybe. We'll see.
Sure.
Tell me about one of the most recent videos you've made. Or is he back?
Like he's trying to come. It looks like he's trying to come back, but I will. I'm working through actually.
Now?
Nope, you still sound like you're in a fishbowl.
Yeah, that's too bad. Can we work with it?
I don't know. My microphone thinks it's working. It's responding. Wow. It's lighting up like it's supposed to.
You just, you just sound muffled, but I think you're still. I can still understand you pretty clearly. It just doesn't sound great. I don't know if that's helpful.
That's no good, is it?
Yeah. So,
here we go. I finally found.
Hey.
There we go. Yep. The setting was not there before I had to restart the computer. Apologize.
Wow.
Old men and technology.
Boy. Anybody who thinks that the computers are taking over the world anytime soon, I gotta tell you, I don't see it happening. So
I kind of do. and it's frustrating to me.
They're super dumb in many ways.
The
computers.
Well, the problem I have is that the way people are using everything, to automate everything, like in Arizona, between Tulsa and Phoenix. Excuse me, not Tulsa, Tucson and Phoenix. There's a trucking line that runs completely automated, and they want to set up so that they can have 40% of the job market eliminated by having trucks drive themselves.
See, yeah, that's shit.
That's 40% of the entire job market.
Yeah.
How are we going to complain that somebody doesn't have a job when there are no jobs? When I was in Phoenix last time for when I was there for the American Atheist National Convention, for example, in Phoenix, they had a Waymo, which is those little cars that have the radar things on them that are taxis that are completely undriven. So you get in the passenger seat, there's nobody in the driver's seat, and the car just drives you. Right?
Oh.
It was one of those downtown Dallas last night. So how can you complain? If you've automated all of the tellers, right? You call into a company, you're going to get a computer that says, you can talk to me and use words like, but I'll never understand a fucking thing you say, right? I'm always, the option is I need a human person who exchanges gases. I need to talk to somebody like that. Somebody made of biological materials.
Yeah.
That's the always, only, ever option. There's never going to be the automated response thing that works for me. So don't automate it. The tellers, don't automate the drivers. Don't automate the operators. I don't want anyone calling me who's a robot either. And I get really irritated when the robots call and pretend that they're a person.
Yeah.
And then when you start arguing with them, they start trying to argue that they are a person, but it's so obvious that they're not.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just part of it. The other part is when you can produce an image of the Grand Moff Tarkin going off Peter Cushing, who's been dead for decades, but put him in the movie anyway. When you can take Carrie Fisher, who's been dead for a year, and it's the 19-year-old version of herself, and you put her in the movie anyway, then look what else you can accomplish when you want to create a video of anybody that you don't like doing embarrassing, stupid stuff. There need to be a whole lot of regulations and lawsuits over presenting people saying things they never would have said, for example.
Yep.
I have huge issues with the AI and not having anything to do with the intelligence of the program. Though, let's throw that in there too. Let's, on the periphery. Oh, and let's also not give it command of our nuclear weaponry.
Let's not do that.
Aron, will you toggle
like
your camera on enough for me?
Okay. What is wrong with my system today?
It might be me. It's
nope.
It's infected with Canadian microbugs.
I've seen in the chat some people have said that my camera froze a couple of times, which I don't know why it would. It doesn't usually, but apparently did 3 times tonight.
Yikes.
That's just Zoom for you.
Yeah. I hope I can blame it on Zoom. However, on one of these occasions, I think I'm going to have to blame. What are you doing? Get out from you are too big. Get out of there. There's no room. There's no room.
See, mine's fast asleep on the couch over there.
He wants to be at my feet, even if that means squishing himself into a space where he does not fit and pulls wires out of the wall to lay down there just to be close to me.
Yeah. He's a big dog.
Anyway, Kipp,
right.
Thank you very much for being on tonight. I was looking forward to the discussion about prophecy. There's one more thing that I didn't bring up. I mentioned earlier in the show that I asked for people to give me 3 prophecies. the three that I most often get. We talked about how the creation of Israel, and then the forecast that Isaiah said that a virgin is going to give birth to a child, and we're going to call it Emmanuel, but really Jesus. There's another one. My favorite other one is where in only one translation it says, instead of like a lion at my hands and feet.
Oh yeah.
There's one
Yeah.
where they're coming at me with dogs. They pierce my hands and feet, and somehow only that one translation only that one line of that story is prophetic for Jesus, and only in that one translation is it prophetic for Jesus. And the entire rest of the paragraph, indeed the rest of the story, is not prophetic at all. It's just that one line, and only in that one translation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole, you're talking about Psalm 22, verses 16 or 17, depending on whether or not you read it in the Hebrew or the English. But it's very clear that the writer of the Passion story, the story of Jesus's execution in the Gospel of Mark, had this psalm kind of in the background of his head as he was writing it. There's a few other elements in there. This is where the casting lots for the garment appears. That's part of Psalm 22. He says the last words of Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, I believe it is, are lama lama sabachthani, Eloi Eloi lama sabachthani, which is Aramaic, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? That is the first line of Psalm 22. But there is this belief that in Psalm 22:17 it says, "They pierced my hands and my feet." That's what you're getting at, and that's based on the Greek version of that text, which mistranslates or doesn't understand what's going on in that line of the text, because it seems to have been corrupted at some point. So it's not easy to understand in the first place, but it's taken this word. In the Hebrew, it just says like a lion, and there's probably supposed to be a verb there that got lost along the way. It just says like a lion, my hands and my feet. The Septuagint translator, the Greek translator of this text, looked at that and said, I don't know what this is. I don't understand what this is. It looks like it could be maybe this other Hebrew verb, which means they dug. So it'd be like, they dug my hands and my feet, which, I mean, that's extracting material out of, right? That's not puncturing. It's a different thing altogether. There's a lot of Hebrew words for stabbing. That's not one of them. Like, not ever. It's just not ever one of them. So it's one of these things where I have a video about this on my channel that I published in the summer, and I have some technical explanations for precisely what happened, because we have a couple of fragments in the Dead Sea Scrolls which preserve this particular text, and we can look at them and we can actually see, oh wow, okay, so that's how these mistakes get made. And that's just what this is. This is a mistake made by a translator, made by a scribe, when copying their text out, that gets turned into theology. And I'll just say one more thing. One of the reasons we know for a fact that this is not a prophecy of any kind is because the New Testament writers were pretty keen on just pulling out stuff that they saw in their scriptures in the Old Testament and then applying that to Jesus. And yet this one verse about piercing the hands and the feet, it's not something that any New Testament writer ever quotes or cites and applies to the crucifixion of Jesus. That doesn't even happen until like the late, I want to say like I think it's the early 3rd century, maybe, is so, a couple hundred years it took before anybody looked at that text and said, oh, wow, that actually looks like it.
For
it
those
could be
who don't know,
That's not.
I do a weekly Bible study. And
I'm there
normally we do that
sometimes.
on Saturday mornings for me in Central Time. That's Saturday morning. But I have an international panel. I have people in 2 people in Canada, Kipp included. I have somebody in the UK, somebody in the Netherlands, somebody in Israel, and so on. And I love that we do this. On occasion, Kipp has been able to join us in these. And what we see a lot from the old rabbinic scribes is a lot different than what we see from Christian commentators. So we'll read what the various rabbis of the day said about this or that verse, how they were interpreted at the time. And then we bring up the Christian interpretations, which are always bizarre and never match. The people who wrote the thing, the Christian interpretation is never like that at all, because we're talking about the Old Testament still. We haven't gotten into the New Testament yet. But the way that the Christians write their commentary is, okay, well, here's a thing that that says somebody's going to be persecuted. This portends Jesus for being persecuted. It's like you could read anything to reflect Jesus somehow. If the only thing you think is Jesus, then everything you read will remind you of Jesus. And this is how the Christian commentators review this. So this is how we see a lot of their fulfilled prophecies. Well, it said that that they were going to be persecuted, and when it says that the sons of man will be their heels will be bruised by the descendants of the serpent, and so, well, when it says that the descendants of man, it's or the descendants of the woman, it's really not talking about Eve, it's talking about Israel, and the descendants of Israel is not talking about mankind, it's actually talking about Jesus specifically. And when it talks about the descendants of the serpent, it doesn't mean Satan's descendants, it means somehow still Satan. So Satan's descendants are Satan still, but and all of this, you have to, when it says this, it really means that, but only right here and not anywhere else. This is the way people interpret their prophecies. My understanding of a prophecy is that a prophet said at some point in time, and there should be a time limit, after this and before that, within this window of opportunity, there a thing will happen. Let's be specific about it. But and every time that I know of that a prophecy of that type has been put down in the Bible, every single one where there's a time limit, they've all failed. Every one. Not one prophecy has ever succeeded. The only ones that Christians will claim succeeded are the ones where they retrofit. Well, when it says this, it reminds me of that, and therefore it's prophetic.
I believe one of my friend Apologia has 6 criteria for what constitutes a proper prophecy and its fulfillment, and I think it's a fine list. It's a fine metric for checking these things, and it just, I think it just reinforces how silly a lot of the so-called Old Testament prophecies are. You reminded me one of my favorites. It's maybe not for the absurdity of it, but I think it's illustrative just how malleable a lot of these texts are. There's a famous one from Isaiah. There's a famous text from Isaiah 40, verse 3. A voice cries out in the wilderness, "Go and prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the paths for our God." Most people recognize this text because in the New Testament it's applied to John the Baptist, and it says that in fulfillment of this prophecy in Isaiah, John the Baptist arrived. He was the voice in the wilderness crying out, "Go and prepare the way of the Lord, make straight the paths for our God, ushering in the arrival of the Messiah, who is supposed to be Jesus. What's really interesting is we see these same texts used by the people who wrote and collected the Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is not just the same text, it's also pretty close to the same time as when Jesus lived. And they have a pretty different take on it. In the first place, they read the text correctly, which says, there's a voice crying out, comma, in the wilderness, go and prepare the way of the Lord, make straight his paths, is what the actual text says. That's what Isaiah is talking about, is that the place where this is going to happen is in the wilderness, not that the proclaimer is in the wilderness. And the writers and the collectors of the Dead Sea Scrolls understood this to refer to themselves. And that's what they understood they were doing. They were going out into the Judean desert, the wilderness, and they were getting things ready for the arrival of their God. So misunderstandings, mistranslations, misinterpretations, that's how this stuff works.
Very good. Thank you for that. So when I ask people for their fulfilled prophecies, I'm always asking for when did somebody know that there is a prophecy that is as yet unfulfilled, that was written by some prophet, and so they're awaiting some kind of acknowledgement that a prophecy existed, and not a retrofit misunderstanding, like when the Muslims say that, when it says that, that God has stretched out the sky. Well, Christians do this too. When it says that God has stretched out the heavens, that's talking about cosmic inflation, which it's clearly not, and nobody would have ever understood it that way. So, I think then it's time to read the chats. Are there chats to read, Lux?
We have a couple. We did have an atheist call in asking about what the Bible means by made in God's image. Up to you guys if you want to take that, if we have time.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Let me see. I got to reopen call-in studio. Okay. Uno momento por favor. Okay.
And then, yes, we have a handful of super chats. $5 or more super chats. We'll read them at the end.
Okay. I'm trying to take that call. So this is Maureen?
Yes.
How do you do? Yeah, reiterate
from
your
Canada,
question, please.
Yes, Canada. Yeah,
Brilliant.
I was kind of wanted to know your opinion on, first of all, what exactly it says in the Bible about being made in God's image, and what you think, like how theists have, presented that. And because obviously it's not a physical image, so I'm thinking, what could it be except, could you see it as God is both bad and good, evil and good, because people are evil and good, so maybe that's the image that we got from? I'm not really sure. I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
You say, obviously, it's not a physical image, but I think it obviously is a physical image, and I think people are trying to find excuses.
We're aware.
To get away
we know
from that.
this. We know this just by virtue of the words that are used in the text. There are demote and selam are the Hebrew words, image and likeness, and we understand what these words mean by just looking throughout the corpus of Hebrew literature that we have at our disposal from the time period. So we look at other places in the Bible, and inscriptions, if we're lucky enough to have them, and it's pretty clear, just based on other parts of the text, that this very much has to do with it's very much about physicality. It is what the gods look like, and this works too because this fits within an ancient Near Eastern cultural context where people thought that the gods were just like great big people. They looked like people. They were, they had physical aspects to them, just like people. They were just gigantic. But then I'd like to say though too, I think you are picking up on something that's significant here, where I think you can read into this a little bit. They probably read into this a little bit as well, in that human beings are every bit like, or I should say it the other way, gods are every bit like human beings in terms of their appearance, as well as their actions, and their feelings, except much more so. So gods are just bigger and stronger and smarter in every way than people, but they also have much deeper, stronger feelings. You ever wonder why Yahweh throws such a temper tantrum in the story of Noah's Ark and goes and destroys all of humanity as a result of that? Yeah, it's because he's got these gigantic God-sized feelings that operate on another level compared to people. So that's kind of how they thought through this stuff. When you say that it might, it might indicate that they're both good, gods are both good and evil like people. While that is not communicated directly in that particular text, this I think is certainly the way people thought about the gods too. You had to be careful about how you spoke to them or interacted with them or what you thought of them, because they could do bad things to you if they weren't happy. The gods tended to be pretty capricious, and you see elements of that still intact within the Bible. Even though much later editors tried to scrub a lot of this stuff out of there, there's still elements of this within the biblical text itself. I think, like I said, the story of Noah's Ark is the flood is a good example just of the capriciousness of this particular deity. So he says himself in I'm going to get the text wrong, but it's in Isaiah. He says himself, he creates evil. That word there means evil, or things that are bad. It's all the same. So yeah.
I'm glad you said that because there have been so many, biblical literalists who have called me stupid or uneducated because I think image means image.
Absolutely means image. Like just physical representation. That's absolutely what it is. It's almost beyond dispute. There's actual large volumes of literature, like scholarly literature written about this. There's a fantastic book. I do talk a little bit about this, by the way, in my own book. I'll just plug that again. But there is a fantastic book written by a phenomenal scholar by the name of Francesca Stavrakopoulou. She wrote a great book called God and Anatomy and published it. I think it's probably 6-7 years ago by now. It's an accessible book. It's a book that anybody can pick up and read, and she does a brilliant job of just demonstrating the physicality of gods within the Bible. And yes, there is more than just one. So there's academic works on this too. I won't, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. But Stavrakopoulou's book is a phenomenal resource for this.
Thank you very much for that. All right, it seems that I think we're at the end of the show. And so it's time
Hard to tell
to read those
sometimes.
chats.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Maureen.
Okay, bye.
Hey.
Uh-oh. Okay, good.
I'm just being slow. Sorry.
You all right, Aaron? Can you?
Aron, please.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear.
Yeah.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, good. I don't know why I couldn't find the mute wasn't working. The unmute wasn't working. Weird.
It's been a day.
Yeah, it has. A little bit wonky. Okay. Let me see if I can get the right screen open to see these super chats. And if I can't, then I'm going to need you to read them for me.
I can do that.
Okay, very good. What do we got? Am I
Do you need me
frozen
to read
again?
it? Oh, okay.
Is my video frozen again?
No, you're good.
Okay. Funny thing, on my screen it looks like it.
Weird.
Yeah. And I can't see.
Do you need me to read it?
Yeah, I need you to read it because I can't see
All
the
right.
chats.
So from Cinnamon Night entered for $10. Thank you very much. Cinnamon Night Entertainment for $10 says, but without gods, how could the gods have made heavy metal to headbang to? I'm just glad that whether there's gods or not, there's heavy metal, because seriously, what kind of a world would this be without it?
Yeah. And I am trying to get to mute buttons because the dogs have decided they're going to make noise. And for whatever reason, it won't show me that. It won't show me the screen.
We can't hear your dogs, by the way.
What's that? Good.
No, we can't hear them right now.
Well, I'm glad of that. But yeah, I'm getting more error messages on the on the link to the show.
Can you see this one, or do you need me to read this one too?
I can see you on a different screen, but not on the one where I need to be able to read the chat. So it's going to have to be
you. Can't see in the Zoom?
I'm sorry, what?
In the Zoom call, you can't see them?
The Zoom won't even open.
Oh shit!
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Should I read this one?
I can
too,
see
then?
it.
Yeah, we only
when
have like
I can
5.
see it when I go to the sys tray,
Dr. Kipp.
Yeah, but I can't open them otherwise.
Okay. So this is from Elira the Free. I don't know. Somebody told are these
Turkish, I think.
Yeah, Turkish
Turkish lira
currency. Lira, thank you. That's it. I'm glad you said that. For 220 Turkish lira, Elira the Free says, I'm happy to see Aron Ra and Dr. Kipp here. It's been a pleasure to listen to you both. As ever, thank you for the laughs and the thoughts.
Well, I'm glad that you can at least hear me, because I also had a good deal of fun having you on today. Too. I want to thank you for being here.
Good. It was my pleasure.
Right, were there any more?
Yeah, there's a couple more here. $20 from Kiastar67 says, thank you for answering the question, Dr. Davis. Thanks to both you and Aron Ra for all you do. You're welcome.
Yeah, my pleasure, certainly.
And $5 Australian from Darren McAuliffe, I believe. Is there a connection? Oh, this is a good question. Is there a connection between, not that there aren't good questions, but this, I'm sorry, I really like this question. Is there a connection between the Book of the Giants and the Epic of Gilgamesh? So the Book of the Giants is a text that appears in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's written in Aramaic, and we also know it from the Mandeans, who preserved it into the medieval period, which is really interesting. And the reason Darren McAuliffe is asking about this is because the Book of the Giants actually mentions Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh is an extremely ancient Mesopotamian text. Some have said that it's the oldest epic ever written. Some have called it the most popular piece of literature of the ancient world. It's very, very old, and people loved it. They adored it, and continued to reproduce it for like well over 1,000 years. It was in circulation. And what's really interesting is that Gilgamesh appears in the Book of the Giants. So the Book of the Giants itself is it was probably written about 300 or 200 BCE, and it's this really interesting story all about how there's this text from Genesis chapter 6 about the sons of God coming down and having sex with human women and producing these offspring called the Nephilim, which gets translated into the Greek as giants, these giant creatures, right? So the book of the Giants is riffing on that story and building this whole new really creative tale about these giants and their interactions with Enoch, just prior to the flood of Noah. It's all pretty wild. But in the book of the Giants, one of the angels, one of these creatures, one of the Nephilim that is identified in there, is named Gilgamesh. There's also at least two other named giants in the book of the Giants, who take on the names of characters from the Enuma Elish. I think they might both come from the Enuma Elish. So what's really cool about this is that the writer, he's not like drawing his story from the Epic of Gilgamesh or from the Enuma Elish. What he's doing is he's using these characters and suggesting that these are who they were, right? Instead of, gods or deities from Mesopotamia, he's saying, no, they're like these, that's who they are. They're these Nephilim, these offspring of gods and human women. It's very cool. Thanks for that question. For $5 Canadian from Where is Waldo? God is punishing Aron with mild inconvenience because God is so powerful.
Indeed, but my God is greater.
Yeah, look at that one. My cat unfortunately won't come into the house anymore, and that has everything to do with my big dog. So,
okay. Sorry to hear that. Was that all the chats?
That's all the super chats.
I think
Okay,
so.
for whatever reason,
Excellent.
the Zoom will not open up. So
Oh wow.
yeah, I have to watch this through another program for whatever reason. Anyway, software
Very frustrating.
issues.
Yeah.
But Kipp, genuine pleasure. Kind of always.
Yeah.
Always
Absolutely.
like chatting with you, but especially I'm glad that we were able to do the show tonight.
Me
and I
too.
understand that we are the last Cus I Wanna on a Saturday. They're going to be doing a different show. And so if you want to do Cus I Wanna, it better be because you want to do it on Friday.
Oh, okay. I see.
So I don't know when we'll be able to do another one of these again unless it's just on my channel. All right. Do you have anything? And what does your shirt say?
Oh, by the way, this is my. You can buy these at my store. It says this is my shirt, which says I fucking love the Bible because of course I do. I'm a biblical scholar, right? But when I say I fucking love the Bible, what I mean by that is that I don't worship the Bible, and I don't think it's the word of any God, and I don't think it's necessarily an accurate record of everything that happened on Earth. I fucking love the Bible because there's a lot of fascinating ancient literature in the Bible, and some of it is just fucking cool. Some of it just is. So
it's the same. It's the same attitude that Francesca Stavrakopoulou takes.
That's right.
That she loves it. She loves it as an archaeological, anthropological tome to give us a perspective of the people at the time that they wrote it, all of that. And she goes, it's fascinating literature, but it's not like it's true.
Exactly. And you know what? It's as any biblical scholar will affirm to you, right? Nobody spends the bulk of their, young adulthood slaving away in graduate school over something that they don't find absolutely fascinating and interesting. So yeah, that's and I that's kind of what I'm all about. I think people are just much better off if they first understand what the Bible is, and then do with it what you will. Somebody had a question here if I'm from Calgary, because they noticed the Flames jersey in the background. I was born and raised in Calgary. I haven't lived there for a long time, but yeah, go Flames.
I can understand why you moved to, what is it, Vancouver?
I'm just outside of Vancouver, yeah. So
yeah. Well, I can certainly, having been to both, I'm confused as to why anyone lives in Calgary.
Well, I listen, it was a really great place to grow up, just because I grew up hiking and snowboarding and camping, right? And if you have to live in a city, and my family did, it's not a bad city to live in, because you can drive for an hour and go play in the mountains. So that's what I did.
Or you can go to a
every
really
weekend.
nice natural history museum.
We had fewer of those, unfortunately, but yeah. Oh, although we did have some, and maybe you're referring to the Royal Tyrrell museum that's close by in Drumheller. Yeah,
yep.
It's fantastic. One of my favorite places. I loved. We had moved before my youngest two. We had our youngest two, but I love taking my oldest son there. It's a fantastic place.
Okay, well, we're going to have to close it up at some point. Thank you so much, Dr. Kipp Davis. Let's make sure to include, if we can, links to your books that you'd made mention of, and if we can't do that, then give us the titles really quickly for people to look up.
So the only affordable one is, the other ones are academic books that nobody can afford to buy. But the affordable book is God's Propaganda: Pulling Back the Curtain on What the Bible Wants You to See. It's also available. It's available in ebook and in audiobook. I read the audiobook myself. And you can get it anywhere.
Outstanding. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you for the rest of you. Good night. Play the music.
Good night.
I don't think I'm playing the music tonight, but hey, don't forget to go to patreon.com/calltheline. We have LineCon coming up soon. Support us on Patreon. Thank you. Okay, good night. Bye.
Okay.